The Irish Wikipedia is the Irish-language version of Wikipedia, run by the Wikimedia Foundation and established in October 2003, with the first article being written in January 2004. The founder of Wikipedia was Gabriel Beecham. In September 2005 over 1,600 articles had been written, with 173 contributors having written material. By March 2007, about 20 regular Wikipedians were writing articles, with up to 7,000 articles having been created. In February 2021, it was just under the 55,000 article mark, making it the 94th largest Wikipedia by article count. The Wikipedia now encompasses a wide range of subjects, including topics as diverse as philosophy, genetics, Aboriginal bark canoes and maritime terminology. The Wikipedia draws directly from Freemite and ELA, an Irish language encyclopedia of science and technology, written by Matt Hussey. Etymology. The names Ireland and Éire derive from Old Irish Iriu, a goddess in Irish mythology first recorded in the 9th century. The etymology of Iriu is disputed but may derive from the Proto-Indo-European root *h2-year, referring to flowing water. History. Prehistoric Ireland. During the last glacial period, and until about 16,000 BC, much of Ireland was periodically covered in ice. The relative sea level was less than 50 m lower, resulting in an ice bridge forming between Ireland and Great Britain. By 14,000 BC this ice bridge existed only between Northern Ireland and Scotland, and by 12,000 BC Ireland was completely separated from Great Britain. Later, around 6100 BC, Great Britain became separated from continental Europe. Until recently, the earliest evidence of human activity in Ireland was dated at 12,500 years ago, demonstrated by a butchered bear bone found in a cave in County Clare. Since 2021, the earliest evidence of human activity in Ireland is dated to 33,000 years ago. By about 8000 BC, more sustained occupation of the island has been shown, with evidence for Mesolithic communities around the island. Sometime before 4000 BC, Neolithic settlers introduced cereal cultivars, domesticated animals such as cattle and sheep, built large timber buildings, and stone monuments. The earliest evidence for farming in Ireland or Great Britain is from Ferriters Cove, County Kerry, where a flint knife, cattle bones and a sheep's tooth were carbon dated to c. 4350 BC. Field systems were developed in different parts of Ireland, including at the Seed Fields, that has been preserved beneath a blanket of peat in present-day Tyrol. An extensive field system, arguably the oldest in the world, consisted of small divisions separated by dry stone walls. The fields were farmed for several centuries between 3500 BC and 3000 BC. Wheat and barley were the principal crops. The Bronze Age began around 2500 BC, with technology changing people's everyday lives during this period through innovations such as the wheel, harnessing oxen, weaving textiles, brewing alcohol, and skillful metalworking, which produced new weapons and tools, along with fine gold decoration and jewellery, such as brooches and torques. Emergence of Celtic Ireland. Late Antiquity and early medieval times. The earliest written records of Ireland come from classical Greco-Roman geographers. Ptolemy in his Almagest refers to Ireland as Micro-Britannia, in contrast to the larger island, which he called Megal-Britannia. In his later work, Geography, Ptolemy refers to Ireland as Iuernia and to Great Britain as Albion. These new names were likely to have been the local names for the islands at the time. The earlier names, in contrast, were likely to have been coined before direct contact with local peoples was made. The Romans referred to Ireland by this name too in its Latinized form, Hibernia or Scotia. Ptolemy records 16 nations inhabiting every part of Ireland in 100 AD. The relationship between the Roman Empire and the kingdoms of ancient Ireland is unclear. However, a number of finds of Roman coins have been made, for example at the Iron Age settlement of Freestone Hill near Gowran and Newgrange. Ireland continued as a patchwork of rival kingdoms. However, beginning in the 7th century, a concept of national kingship gradually became articulated through the concept of a High King of Ireland. Medieval Irish literature portrays an almost unbroken sequence of high kings stretching back thousands of years, but modern historians believe the scheme was constructed in the 8th century to justify the status of powerful political groupings by projecting the origins of their rule into the remote past. All of the Irish kingdoms had their own kings but were nominally subject to the High King. The High King was drawn from the ranks of the provincial kings and ruled also the royal kingdom of Meath, with the ceremonial capital at the Hill of Tara. The concept did not become a political reality until the Viking Age, and even then was not a consistent one. Ireland did have a culturally unifying rule of law, the early written judicial system, the Brehon laws, administered by a professional class of jurists known as the Brehons. The Chronicle of Ireland records that in 431, Bishop Palladius arrived in Ireland on a mission from Pope Celestine I to minister to the Irish already believing in Christ. The same chronicle records that Saint Patrick, Ireland's best-known patron saint, arrived the following year. There is continued debate over the missions of Palladius and Patrick, but the consensus is that they both took place and that the older Druid tradition collapsed in the face of the new religion. Irish Christian scholars excelled in the study of Latin and Greek learning and Christian theology. In the monastic culture that followed the Christianization of Ireland, Latin and Greek learning was preserved in Ireland during the early Middle Ages in contrast to elsewhere in Western Europe, where the Dark Ages followed the fall of the Western Roman Empire. The arts of manuscript illumination, metalworking, and sculpture flourished and produced treasures such as the Book of Kells, ornate jewelry and the many carved stone crosses that still dot the island today. A mission founded in 563 on Iona by the Irish monk Saint Columba began a tradition of Irish missionary work that spread Celtic Christianity and learning to Scotland, England, and the Frankish Empire on continental Europe after the fall of Rome. These missions continued until the late Middle Ages, establishing monasteries and centers of learning, producing scholars such as Setulius Scotus and Johannes Iri Eugenia and exerting much influence in Europe. From the 9th century, waves of Viking raiders plundered Irish monasteries and towns. These raids added to a pattern of raiding and endemic warfare that was already deep-seated in Ireland. The Vikings were involved in establishing most of the major coastal settlements in Ireland: Dublin, Limerick, Cork, Wexford, Waterford, as well as other smaller settlements. Norman and English invasions. On May 1, 1169, an expedition of Cambro-Norman knights, with an army of about 600 men, landed at Bannow-Strand in present-day County Wexford. It was led by Richard de Clare, known as Strongbow owing to his prowess as an archer. The invasion, which coincided with a period of renewed Norman expansion, was at the invitation of Dermot mac Maroof, King of Leinster. In 1166, mac Maroof had fled to Anjou, France, following a war involving Tiernan Uaruerc of Briefn, and sought the assistance of the Angevin King Henry II, in recapturing his kingdom. In 1171, Henry arrived in Ireland in order to review the general progress of the expedition. He wanted to re-exert royal authority over the invasion which was expanding beyond his control. Henry successfully reimposed his authority over Strongbow and the Cambro-Norman warlords and persuaded many of the Irish kings to accept him as their overlord, an arrangement confirmed in the 1175 Treaty of Windsor. The invasion was legitimized by reference to provisions of the alleged papal bull Laudabiliter, issued by an Englishman, Adrian IV, in 1155. The document apparently encouraged Henry to take control in Ireland in order to oversee the financial and administrative reorganisation of the Irish Church and its integration into the Roman Church system. Some restructuring had already begun at the ecclesiastical level following the Synod of Kells in 1152. There has been significant controversy regarding the authenticity of Laudabiliter, and there is no general agreement as to whether the bull was genuine or a forgery. Further, it had no standing in the Irish legal system. In 1172, Pope Alexander III further encouraged Henry to advance the integration of the Irish Church with Rome. Henry was authorized to impose a tithe of 1 penny per hearth as an annual contribution. This church levy, called Peter's Pence, is extant in Ireland as a voluntary donation. In turn, Henry assumed the title of Lord of Ireland, which Henry conferred on his younger son, John Lackland, in 1185. This defined the Anglo-Norman administration in Ireland as the Lordship of Ireland. When Henry's successor died unexpectedly in 1199, John inherited the crown of England and retained the Lordship of Ireland. Over the century that followed, Norman feudal law gradually replaced the Gaelic Brehon law across large areas, so that by the late 13th century the Norman Irish had established a feudal system throughout much of Ireland. Norman settlements were characterized by the establishment of baronies, manors, towns, and the seats of the modern county system. A version of the Magna Carta, substituting Dublin for London and the Irish Church for the English Church at the time, the Catholic Church, was published in 1216 and the Parliament of Ireland was founded in 1297. Gaelicization. From the mid-14th century, after the Black Death, Norman settlements in Ireland went into a period of decline. The Norman rulers and the Gaelic Irish elites intermarried and the areas under Norman rule became Gaelicized. In some parts, a hybrid Hiberno-Norman culture emerged. In response, the Irish Parliament passed the Statutes of Kilkenny in 1367. These were a set of laws designed to prevent the assimilation of the Normans into Irish society by requiring English subjects in Ireland to speak English, follow English customs and abide by English law. By the end of the 15th century, Central English authority in Ireland had all but disappeared, and a renewed Irish culture and language, albeit with Norman influences, was dominant again. English crown control remained relatively unshaken in an amorphous foothold around Dublin known as the Pale, and under the provisions of Poyning's Law of 1494, Irish parliamentary legislation was subject to the approval of the English Privy Council. The Kingdom of Ireland. The title of King of Ireland was recreated in 1542 by Henry VIII, the then King of England, of the Tudor dynasty. English rule was reinforced and expanded in Ireland during the latter part of the 16th century, leading to the Tudor conquest of Ireland. A near-complete conquest was achieved by the turn of the 17th century, following the 9 Years' War and the flight of the Earls. This control was consolidated during the wars and conflicts of the 17th century, including the English and Scottish colonization in the plantations of Ireland, the Wars of the Three Kingdoms and the Williamite War. Irish losses during the Wars of the Three Kingdoms are estimated to include 20,000 battlefield casualties. 200,000 civilians are estimated to have died as a result of a combination of war-related famine, displacement, guerrilla activity, and pestilence throughout the war. A further 50,000 were sent into indentured servitude in the West Indies. Physician General William Petty estimated that 504,000 Catholic Irish and 112,000 Protestant settlers died, and 100,000 people were transported, as a result of the war. If a pre-war population of 1.5 million is assumed, this would mean that the population was reduced by almost half. The religious struggles of the 17th century left a deep sectarian division in Ireland. Religious allegiance now determined the perception in law of loyalty to the Irish King and Parliament. After the passing of the Test Act 1672, and the victory of the forces of the dual monarchy of William and Mary over the Jacobites, Roman Catholics, and nonconforming Protestant dissenters were barred from sitting as members in the Irish Parliament. Under the emerging penal laws, Irish Roman Catholics and dissenters were increasingly deprived of various civil rights, even the ownership of hereditary property. Additional regressive punitive legislation followed in 1703, 1709 and 1728. This completed a comprehensive systemic effort to materially disadvantage Roman Catholics and Protestant dissenters while enriching a new ruling class of Anglican conformists. The new Anglo-Irish ruling class became known as the Protestant Ascendancy. The Great Frost struck Ireland and the rest of Europe between December 1739 and September 1741, after a decade of relatively mild winters. The winters destroyed stored crops of potatoes and other staples, and the poor summers severely damaged harvests. This resulted in the famine of 1740. An estimated 250,000 people died from the ensuing pestilence and disease. The Irish government halted export of corn and kept the army in quarters but did little more. Local gentry and charitable organizations provided relief but could do little to prevent the ensuing mortality. In the aftermath of the famine, an increase in industrial production and a surge in trade brought a succession of construction booms. The population soared in the latter part of this century and the architectural legacy of Georgian Ireland was built. In 1782, Poyning's Law was repealed, giving Ireland legislative independence from Great Britain for the first time since 1495. The British government, however, still retained the right to nominate the Government of Ireland without the consent of the Irish Parliament. Union with Great Britain. In 1798, members of the Protestant dissenter tradition made common cause with Roman Catholics in a republican rebellion inspired and led by the Society of United Irishmen, with the aim of creating an independent Ireland. Despite assistance from France, the rebellion was put down by British and Irish government and yeomanry forces. In 1800, the British and Irish parliaments both passed Acts of Union that, with effect from January 1, 1801, merged the Kingdom of Ireland and the Kingdom of Great Britain to create a united Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland. The passage of the Act in the Irish Parliament was ultimately achieved with substantial majorities, having failed on the first attempt in 1799. According to contemporary documents and historical analysis, this was achieved through a considerable degree of bribery, with funding provided by the British Secret Service Office, and the awarding of peerages, places, and honours to secure votes. Thus, the Parliament in Ireland was abolished and replaced by a united Parliament at Westminster in London, though resistance remained, as evidenced by Robert Emmet's failed Irish Rebellion of 1803. Aside from the development of the linen industry, Ireland was largely passed over by the Industrial Revolution, partly because it lacked coal and iron resources and partly because of the impact of the sudden union with the structurally superior economy of England, which saw Ireland as a source of agricultural produce and capital. The Great Famine of 1845–1851 devastated Ireland, as in those years Ireland's population fell by one-third. More than 1 million people died from starvation and disease, with an additional million people emigrating during the famine, mostly to the United States and Canada. In the century that followed, an economic depression caused by the famine resulted in a further million people emigrating. By the end of the decade, half of all immigration to the United States was from Ireland. The period of civil unrest that followed until the end of the 19th century is referred to as the Land War. Mass emigration became deeply entrenched and the population continued to decline until the mid-20th century. Immediately prior to the famine, the population was recorded as 8.2 million by the 1841 census. The population has never returned to this level since. The population continued to fall until 1961. County Leitrim was the final Irish county to record a population increase post-famine, in 2006. The 19th and early 20th centuries saw the rise of modern Irish nationalism, primarily among the Roman Catholic population. The preeminent Irish political figure after the Union was Daniel O'Connell. He was elected as Member of Parliament for Ennis in a surprise result, and despite being unable to take his seat as a Roman Catholic, O'Connell spearheaded a vigorous campaign that was taken up by the Prime Minister, the Irish-born soldier and statesman, the Duke of Wellington. Steering the Catholic Relief Bill through Parliament, aided by future Prime Minister Robert Peel, Wellington prevailed upon a reluctant George IV to sign the bill and proclaim it into law. George's father had opposed the plan of the earlier Prime Minister, Pitt the Younger, to introduce such a bill following the Union of 1801, fearing Catholic emancipation to be in conflict with the Act of Settlement 1701. Daniel O'Connell led a subsequent campaign for the repeal of the Act of Union, which failed. Later in the century, Charles Stewart Parnell and others campaigned for autonomy within the Union, or Home Rule. Unionists, especially those located in Ulster, were strongly opposed to Home Rule, which they thought would be dominated by Catholic interests. After several attempts to pass a Home Rule bill through Parliament, it looked certain that one would finally pass in 1914. To prevent this from happening, the Ulster Volunteers were formed in 1913 under the leadership of Edward Carson. Their formation was followed in 1914 by the establishment of the Irish Volunteers, whose aim was to ensure that the Home Rule Bill was passed. The Act was passed, but with the temporary exclusion of the 6 counties of Ulster, which later became Northern Ireland. Before it could be implemented, however, the Act was suspended for the duration of the First World War. The Irish Volunteers split into 2 groups. The majority, approximately 175,000 in number, under John Redmond, took the name National Volunteers and supported Irish involvement in the war. A minority, approximately 13,000, retained the Irish Volunteers name and opposed Ireland's involvement in the war. The Easter Rising of 1916 was carried out by the latter group together with a smaller socialist militia, the Irish Citizen Army. The British response, executing 15 leaders of the Rising over a period of 10 days and imprisoning or interning more than 1,000 people, turned the mood of the country in favour of the rebels. Support for Irish republicanism increased further due to the ongoing war in Europe, as well as the conscription crisis of 1918. The pro-independence Republican Party, Sinn Féin, received overwhelming endorsement in the general election of 1918, and in 1919 proclaimed an Irish Republic, setting up its own parliament and government. Simultaneously, the Volunteers, which became known as the Irish Republican Army, launched a 3-year guerrilla war, which ended in a truce in July 1921. Partition. In December 1921, the Anglo-Irish Treaty was concluded between the British government and representatives of the Second Dáil. It gave Ireland complete independence in its home affairs and practical independence for foreign policy, but an opt-out clause allowed Northern Ireland to remain within the United Kingdom, which it immediately exercised. Additionally, members of the Free State Parliament were required to swear an oath of allegiance to the Constitution of the Irish Free State and make a statement of faithfulness to the King. Disagreements over these provisions led to a split in the nationalist movement and a subsequent Irish Civil War between the new government of the Irish Free State and those opposed to the treaty, led by Eamon de Valera. The Civil War officially ended in May 1923 when de Valera issued a ceasefire order. Independence. Northern Ireland. Politics. The island is divided between the Republic of Ireland, an independent state, and Northern Ireland, a constituent country of the United Kingdom. They share an open border and both are part of the common travel area, and as a consequence, there is free movement of people, goods, services, and capital across the border. The Republic of Ireland is a member state of the European Union, while the United Kingdom is a former member state, having both acceded to its precursor entity, the European Economic Community, in 1973, but the UK left the European Union in 2020 after a referendum on EU membership was held in 2016, which resulted in 51.9% of UK voters choosing to leave the bloc. Republic of Ireland. The Republic of Ireland is a parliamentary democracy based on the Westminster system, with a written constitution and a popularly elected president whose role is mostly ceremonial. The Oireachtas is a bicameral parliament, composed of Dáil Éireann, a House of Representatives, and Sinead Éireann, an upper house. The government is headed by a prime minister, the Dáilsiach, who is appointed by the president on the nomination of the Dáil. Its capital is Dublin. The Republic of Ireland today ranks among the wealthiest countries in the world in terms of GDP per capita, and in 2015 was ranked the sixth most developed nation in the world by the United Nations Human Development Index. A period of rapid economic expansion from 1995 onwards became known as the Celtic Tiger period, was brought to an end in 2008 with an unprecedented financial crisis and an economic depression in 2009. Northern Ireland. All-Island institutions. As part of the Good Friday Agreement, the British and Irish governments agreed on the creation of all-island institutions and areas of cooperation. The North/South Ministerial Council is an institution through which ministers from the Government of Ireland and the Northern Ireland Executive agree all-island policies. At least 6 of these policy areas must have an associated all-island implementation body, and at least 6 others must be implemented separately in each jurisdiction. The implementation bodies are Waterways Ireland, the Food Safety Promotion Board, Intertrade Ireland, the Special European Union Programmes Body, the North/South Language Body, and the Foyle, Carlingford, and Irish Lights Commission. The British-Irish Intergovernmental Conference provides for cooperation between the Government of Ireland and the Government of the United Kingdom on all matters of mutual interest, especially Northern Ireland. In light of the Republic's particular interest in the governance of Northern Ireland, regular and frequent meetings chaired by the ROI Minister for Foreign Affairs and the UK Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, dealing with non-devolved matters to do with Northern Ireland and non-devolved All-Ireland issues, are required to take place under the establishing treaty. The North/South Inter-Parliamentary Association is a joint parliamentary forum for the island of Ireland. It has no formal powers but operates as a forum for discussing matters of common concern between the respective legislatures. Geography. Ireland is located in the northwest of Europe, between latitudes 51 degrees and 56 degrees north, and longitudes 11 degrees and 5 degrees west. It is separated from Great Britain by the Irish Sea and the North Channel, which has a width of 23 kilometers at its narrowest point. To the west is the Northern Atlantic Ocean, and to the south is the Celtic Sea, which lies between Ireland and Brittany, in France. Ireland has a total area of 84,421 square kilometers, of which the Republic of Ireland occupies 83%. Ireland and Great Britain, together with many nearby smaller islands, are known collectively as the British Isles. As the term British Isles is controversial in relation to Ireland, the alternate term Britain and Ireland is often used as a neutral term for the islands. A ring of coastal mountains surrounds low plains at the centre of the island. The highest of these is Carron-to-Hyle in County Kerry, which rises to 1,039 m above sea level. The most arable land lies in the province of Leinster. Western areas are mainly mountainous and rocky with green panoramic vistas. River Shannon, the island's longest river at 360.5 kilometers long, rises in County Cavan in the northwest and flows through Limerick in the midwest. Geology. The island consists of varied geological provinces. In the west, around County Galway and County Donegal, is a medium to high-grade metamorphic and igneous complex of caledonite affinity, similar to the Scottish Highlands. Across southeast Ulster and extending southwest to Longford and south to Navan is a province of Ordovician and Silurian rocks, with similarities to the southern uplands province of Scotland. Further south, along the County Wexford coastline, is an area of granite intrusives into more Ordovician and Silurian rocks, like that found in Wales. In the southwest, around Bantry Bay and the mountains of MacGillycuddy's Reeks, is an area of substantially deformed, lightly metamorphosed Devonian-aged rocks. This partial ring of hard rock geology is covered by a blanket of Carboniferous limestone over the center of the country, giving rise to a comparatively fertile and lush landscape. The west coast district of the Ba and around Lisdoonvarna has well-developed karst features. Significant stratiform lead zinc mineralization is found in the limestones around silver mines and Teaneck. Hydrocarbon exploration is ongoing following the first major find at the Kinsale Head gas field off Cork in the mid-1970s. In 1999, economically significant finds of natural gas were made in the Corrib gas field off the County Mayo coast. This has increased activity off the west coast in parallel with the west of Shetland step-out development from the North Sea hydrocarbon province. In 2000, the Helvig oil field was discovered, which was estimated to contain over 28 million barrels of oil. Climate. The island's lush vegetation, a product of its mild climate and frequent rainfall, earns it the sobriquet the Emerald Isle. Overall, Ireland has a mild but changeable oceanic climate with few extremes. The climate is typically insular and temperate, avoiding the extremes in temperature of many other areas in the world at similar latitudes. This is a result of the moist winds which ordinarily prevail from the southwestern Atlantic. Precipitation falls throughout the year but is light overall, particularly in the east. The west tends to be wetter on average and prone to Atlantic storms, especially in the late autumn and winter months. These occasionally bring destructive winds and higher total rainfall to these areas, as well as sometimes snow and hail. The regions of North County Galway and East County Mayo have the highest incidence of recorded lightning annually for the island, with lightning occurring approximately 5 to 10 days per year in these areas. Munster, in the south, records the least snow, whereas Ulster, in the north, records the most. Inland areas are warmer in summer and colder in winter. Usually around 40 days of the year are below freezing 0 degrees Celsius at inland weather stations, compared to 10 days at coastal stations. Ireland is sometimes affected by heat waves, most recently in 1995, 2003, 2006, 2013 and 2018. In common with the rest of Europe, Ireland experienced unusually cold weather during the winter of 2010-11. Temperatures fell as low as 17.2 degrees C in County Mayo on December 20 and up to a meter of snow fell in mountainous areas. Flora and fauna. Unlike Great Britain, which had a land bridge with mainland Europe, Ireland only had an ice bridge ending around 14,000 years ago at the end of the last ice age, and as a result, it has fewer land animal and plant species than Great Britain or mainland Europe. There are 55 mammal species in Ireland, and of them, only 26 land mammal species are considered native to Ireland. Some species, such as the red fox, hedgehog, and badger, are very common, whereas others, like the Irish hare, red deer, and pine marten, are less so. Aquatic wildlife, such as species of sea turtle, shark, seal, whale, and dolphin, are common off the coast. About 400 species of birds have been recorded in Ireland. Many of these are migratory, including the barn swallow. Several different habitat types are found in Ireland, including farmland, open woodland, temperate broadleaf and mixed forests, conifer plantations, peat bogs and a variety of coastal habitats. However, agriculture drives current land use patterns in Ireland, limiting natural habitat preserves, particularly for larger wild mammals with greater territorial needs. With no large apex predators in Ireland other than humans and dogs, such populations of animals as semi-wild deer that cannot be controlled by smaller predators, such as the fox, are controlled by annual culling. There are no snakes in Ireland, and only one species of reptile is native to the island. Extinct species include the Irish elk, the great auk, brown bear, and the wolf. Some previously extinct birds, such as the golden eagle, have been reintroduced after decades of extirpation. Ireland is now one of the least forested countries in Europe. Until the end of the Middle Ages, Ireland was heavily forested. Native species include deciduous trees such as oak, ash, hazel, birch, alder, willow, aspen, rowan and hawthorn, as well as evergreen trees such Scots pine, yew, holly, and strawberry trees. Only about 10% of Ireland today is woodland, most of this is non-native conifer plantations, and only 2% is native woodland. The average woodland cover of European countries is over 33%. In the Republic, about 389,356 hectares is owned by the state, mainly by the Forestry Service Coilt. Remnants of native forest can be found scattered around the island, in particular in the Killarney National Park. Much of the land is now covered with pasture and there are many species of wildflower. Gorse, a wild furze, is commonly found growing in the uplands and ferns are plentiful in the more moist regions, especially in the western parts. It is home to hundreds of plant species, some of them unique to the island, and has been invaded by some grasses, such as Spartina anglica. The algal and seaweed flora is that of the cold temperate variety. The total number of species is 574. The island has been invaded by some algae, some of which are now well established. Because of its mild climate, many species, including subtropical species such as palm trees, are grown in Ireland. Phytogeographically, Ireland belongs to the Atlantic European province of the Circumboreal region within the Boreal Kingdom. The island can be subdivided into two ecoregions, the Celtic broadleaf forests and North Atlantic moist mixed forests. Impact of agriculture. The long history of agricultural production, coupled with modern intensive agricultural methods such as pesticide and fertilizer use and runoff from contaminants into streams, rivers, and lakes, has placed pressure on biodiversity in Ireland. A land of green fields for crop cultivation and cattle rearing limits the space available for the establishment of native wild species. Hedgerows, however, traditionally used for maintaining and demarcating land boundaries, act as a refuge for native wild flora. This ecosystem stretches across the countryside and acts as a network of connections to preserve remnants of the ecosystem that once covered the island. Subsidies under the Common Agricultural Policy, which supported agricultural practices that preserved hedgerow environments, are undergoing reforms. The Common Agricultural Policy had in the past subsidized potentially destructive agricultural practices, for example by emphasizing production without placing limits on indiscriminate use of fertilizers and pesticides, but reforms have gradually decoupled subsidies from production levels and introduced environmental and other requirements. 32% of Ireland's greenhouse gas emissions are correlated to agriculture. Forested areas typically consist of monoculture plantations of non-native species, which may result in habitats that are not suitable for supporting native species of invertebrates. Natural areas require fencing to prevent overgrazing by deer and sheep that roam over uncultivated areas. Grazing in this manner is one of the main factors preventing the natural regeneration of forests across many regions of the country. Demographics. The population of Ireland is just over 7 million, of which approximately 5.1 million reside in the Republic of Ireland and 1.9 million reside in Northern Ireland. People have lived in Ireland for over 9,000 years. Early historical and genealogical records note the existence of major groups such as the Cruithin, Corcoloid, Dalriada, Darine, Deirkton, Dulbeitna, Irane, Lagan, Dolaid. Later major groups included the Connachta, Chainachta, Eoganachta. Smaller groups included the Athich-Thuatha, Calraic, Chiaraic, Conmaicni, Dartraic, Diasi, Isle, Furbolg, Fortuatha, Galenga, Gammon-Raig, Mairtine, Muskraig, Partraig, Sagain, Uaithni, Uimain, Uiliadhain. Many survived into late medieval times. Others vanished as they became politically unimportant. Over the past 1,200 years, Vikings, Normans, Welsh, Flemings, Scots, English, Africans and Eastern Europeans have all added to the population and have had significant influences on Irish culture. The population of Ireland rose rapidly from the 16th century until the mid-19th century, interrupted briefly by the famine of 1740–41, which killed roughly 2/5 of the island's population. The population rebounded and multiplied over the next century, but the Great Famine of the 1840s caused 1 million deaths and forced over 1 million more to emigrate in its immediate wake. Over the following century, the population was reduced by over half, at a time when the general trend in European countries was for populations to rise by an average of threefold. Ireland's largest religious group is Christianity. The largest denomination is Roman Catholicism, representing over 73% of the island. Most of the rest of the population adhere to one of the various Protestant denominations. The largest is the Anglican Church of Ireland. The Muslim community is growing in Ireland, mostly through increased immigration, with a 50% increase in the Republic between the 2006 and 2011 census. The island has a small Jewish community. About 4% of the Republic's population and about 14% of the Northern Ireland population describe themselves as of no religion. In a 2010 survey conducted on behalf of the Irish Times, 32% of respondents said they went to a religious service more than once per week. Divisions and settlements. Traditionally, Ireland is subdivided into 4 provinces: Connaught, Leinster, Munster, and Ulster. In a system that developed between the 13th and 17th centuries, Ireland has 32 traditional counties. 26 of these counties are in the Republic of Ireland, and 6 are in Northern Ireland. The 6 counties that constitute Northern Ireland are all in the province of Ulster. As such, Ulster is often used as a synonym for Northern Ireland, although the two are not coterminous. In the Republic of Ireland, counties form the basis of the system of local government. Counties Dublin, Cork, Limerick, Galway, Waterford, and Tipperary have been broken up into smaller administrative areas. However, they are still treated as counties for cultural and some official purposes, for example, postal addresses, and by the Ordnance Survey Ireland. Counties in Northern Ireland are no longer used for local governmental purposes, but, as in the Republic, their traditional boundaries are still used for informal purposes such as sports leagues and in cultural or tourism contexts. City status in Ireland is decided by legislative or royal charter. Dublin, with over 1 million residents in the Greater Dublin area, is the largest city on the island. Belfast, with 579,726 residents, is the largest city in Northern Ireland. City status does not directly equate with population size. For example, Armagh, with 14,590 is the seat of the Church of Ireland and the Roman Catholic Primate of all Ireland, and was re-granted city status by Queen Elizabeth II in 1994. In the Republic of Ireland, Kilkenny, the seat of the Butler dynasty, while no longer a city for administrative purposes, is entitled by law to continue to use the description. Migration. The population of Ireland collapsed dramatically during the second half of the 19th century. A population of over 8 million in 1841 was reduced to slightly over 4 million by 1921. In part, the fall in population was caused by death from the Great Famine of 1845 to 1852, which took roughly 1 million lives. The remaining decline of around 3 million was due to the entrenched culture of emigration caused by the dire economic state of the country, lasting until the 21st century. Emigration from Ireland in the 19th century contributed to the populations of England, the United States, Canada, and Australia, in all of which a large Irish diaspora lives. As of 2006, 4.3 million Canadians, or 14% of the population, were of Irish descent, while around one-third of the Australian population had an element of Irish descent. As of 2013, there were 40 million Irish Americans and 33 million Americans who claimed Irish ancestry. With growing prosperity since the last decade of the 20th century, Ireland became a destination for immigrants. Since the European Union expanded to include Poland in 2004, Polish people have comprised the largest number of immigrants from Central Europe. There has also been significant immigration from Lithuania, Czech Republic, and Latvia. The Republic of Ireland in particular has seen large-scale immigration, with 420,000 foreign nationals as of 2006, about 10% of the population. Nearly a quarter of births in 2009 were to mothers born outside of Ireland. Up to 50,000 Eastern and Central European migrant workers left Ireland in response to the Irish financial crisis. Languages. The two official languages of the Republic of Ireland are Irish and English. Each language has produced noteworthy literature. Irish, though now only the language of a minority, was the vernacular of the Irish people for thousands of years and was possibly introduced during the Iron Age. It began to be written down after Christianization in the 5th century and spread to Scotland and the Isle of Man, where it evolved into the Scottish Gaelic and Manx languages respectively. The Irish language has a vast treasury of written texts from many centuries and is divided by linguists into Old Irish from the 6th to 10th century, Middle Irish from the 10th to 13th century, Early Modern Irish until the 17th century, and the Modern Irish spoken today. It remained the dominant language of Ireland for most of those periods, having influences from Latin, Old Norse, French, and English. It declined under British rule but remained the majority tongue until the early 19th century, and since then has been a minority language. The Gaelic revival of the late 19th and early 20th centuries had a long-term influence. Irish is taught in mainstream Irish schools as a compulsory subject, but teaching methods have been criticized for their ineffectiveness, with most students showing little evidence of fluency even after 14 years of instruction. There is now a growing population of urban Irish speakers in both the Republic and Northern Ireland, especially in Dublin and Belfast, with the children of such Irish speakers sometimes attending Irish medium schools. It has been argued that they tend to be more highly educated than monolingual English speakers. Recent research suggests that urban Irish is developing in a direction of its own, both in pronunciation and grammar. Traditional rural Irish-speaking areas, known collectively as the Gaeltacht, are in linguistic decline. The main Gaeltacht areas are in the west, southwest and northwest, in Galway, Mayo, Donegal, Western Cork and Kerry, with smaller Gaeltacht areas near Dungarvan in Waterford and in Meath. English in Ireland was first introduced during the Norman invasion. It was spoken by a few peasants and merchants brought over from England and was largely replaced by Irish before the Tudor conquest of Ireland. It was introduced as the official language during the Tudor and Cromwellian conquests. The Ulster plantations gave it a permanent foothold in Ulster, and it remained the official and upper-class language elsewhere, the Irish-speaking chieftains and nobility having been deposed. Language shift during the 19th century replaced Irish with English as the first language for a vast majority of the population. Fewer than 2% of the population of the Republic of Ireland today speak Irish on a daily basis, and under 10% regularly, outside of the education system, and 38% of those over 15 years are classified as Irish speakers. In Northern Ireland, English is the de facto official language, but official recognition is afforded to Irish, including specific protective measures under Part 3 of the European Charter for Regional or Minority Languages. A lesser status is given to Ulster Scots dialects, which are spoken by roughly 2% of Northern Ireland residents, and also spoken by some in the Republic of Ireland. Since the 1960s, with the increase in immigration, many more languages have been introduced, particularly deriving from Asia and Eastern Europe. Also native to Ireland are Shuilta, the language of the nomadic Irish travellers, Irish Sign Language, and Northern Ireland Sign Language. Culture. Ireland's culture comprises elements of the culture of ancient peoples, later immigrant, and broadcast cultural influences. In broad terms, Ireland is regarded as one of the Celtic nations of Europe, alongside Scotland, Wales, Cornwall, Isle of Man and Brittany. This combination of cultural influences is visible in the intricate designs termed Irish interlace or Celtic knotwork. These can be seen in the ornamentation of medieval religious and secular works. The style is still popular today in jewellery and graphic art, as is the distinctive style of traditional Irish music and dance, and has become indicative of modern Celtic culture in general. Religion has played a significant role in the cultural life of the island since ancient times. Ireland's pre-Christian heritage fused with the Celtic Church following the missions of St. Patrick in the 5th century. The Hiberno-Scottish missions, begun by the Irish monk St. Columba, spread the Irish vision of Christianity to pagan England and the Frankish Empire. These missions brought written language to an illiterate population of Europe during the Dark Ages that followed the fall of Rome, earning Ireland the sobriquet, the Island of Saints and Scholars. Since the 20th century, Irish pubs worldwide have become outposts of Irish culture, especially those with a full range of cultural and gastronomic offerings. The Republic of Ireland's national theatre is the Abbey Theatre, which was founded in 1904, and the National Irish Language Theatre is an Taibite Thearc, which was established in 1928 in Galway. Playwrights such as Sean O'Casey, Brian Friel, Sebastian Barry, Conor McPherson, and Billy Roche are internationally renowned. Arts. Literature. Music. Art. Science. The Irish philosopher and theologian Johannes Scotus Iri Eugenia was considered one of the leading intellectuals of the early Middle Ages. Sir Ernest Henry Shackleton, an Irish explorer, was one of the principal figures of Antarctic exploration. He, along with his expedition, made the first ascent of Mount Erebus and the discovery of the approximate location of the South Magnetic Pole. Robert Boyle was a 17th-century natural philosopher, chemist, physicist, inventor, and early gentleman scientist. He is largely regarded as one of the founders of modern chemistry and is best known for the formulation of Boyle's law. 19th-century physicist, John Tyndall, discovered the Tyndall effect. Father Nicholas Joseph Callan, professor of natural philosophy in Maynooth College, is best known for his invention of the induction coil, transformer, and he discovered an early method of galvanization in the 19th century. Other notable Irish physicists include Ernest Walton, winner of the 1951 Nobel Prize in Physics. With Sir John Douglas Cockcroft, he was the first to split the nucleus of the atom by artificial means and made contributions to the development of a new theory of wave equation. William Thomson, or Lord Kelvin, is the person whom the absolute temperature unit, the Kelvin, is named after. Sir Joseph Larmor, a physicist and mathematician, made innovations in the understanding of electricity, dynamics, thermodynamics, and the electron theory of matter. His most influential work was Ether and Matter, a book on theoretical physics published in 1900. George Johnstone Stoney introduced the term electron in 1891. John Stuart Bell was the originator of Bell's theorem in a paper concerning the discovery of the Bell-Jackie-Adler anomaly and was nominated for a Nobel Prize. The astronomer Jocelyn Bell Burnell, from Lagan, County Armagh, discovered pulsars in 1967. Notable mathematicians include Sir William Rao in Hamilton, famous for work in classical mechanics and the invention of quaternions. Francis Isidro Edgeworth's contribution, the Edgeworth box, remains influential in neoclassical microeconomic theory to this day, while Richard Cantillon inspired Adam Smith, among others. John B. Cosgrave was a specialist in number theory and discovered a 2000-digit prime number in 1999 and a record composite Fermat number in 2003. John Lytton Singh made progress in different fields of science, including mechanics and geometrical methods in general relativity. He had mathematician John Nash as one of his students. Kathleen Lonsdale, born in Ireland and most known for her work with crystallography, became the first female president of the British Association for the Advancement of Science. Ireland has 9 universities, 7 in the Republic of Ireland and 2 in Northern Ireland, including Trinity College Dublin and the University College Dublin, as well as numerous third-level colleges and institutes and a branch of the Open University in Ireland. Ireland was ranked 19th in the Global Innovation Index in 2021, down from 12th in 2019. Sports. Gaelic football is the most popular sport in Ireland in terms of match attendance and community involvement, with about 2,600 clubs on the island. In 2003 it represented 34% of total sports attendances at events in Ireland and abroad, followed by hurling at 23%, soccer at 16% and rugby at 8%. The All-Ireland football final is the most watched event in the sporting calendar. Soccer is the most widely played team game on the island and the most popular in Northern Ireland. Other sporting activities with the highest levels of playing participation include swimming, golf, aerobics, cycling, and billiards/snooker. Many other sports are also played and followed, including boxing, cricket, fishing, greyhound racing, handball, hockey, horse racing, motor sport, show jumping and tennis. The island fields a single international team in most sports. One notable exception to this is association football, although both associations continued to field international teams under the name Ireland until the 1950s. The sport is also the most notable exception where the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland field separate international teams. Northern Ireland has produced 2 world snooker champions. Field sports. Boxing. Other sports. Recreation. Food and drink. Food and cuisine in Ireland take their influence from the crops grown and animals farmed in the island's temperate climate and from the social and political circumstances of Irish history. For example, whilst from the Middle Ages until the arrival of the potato in the 16th century the dominant feature of the Irish economy was the herding of cattle, the number of cattle a person owned was equated to their social standing. Thus herders would avoid slaughtering a milk-producing cow. For this reason, pork and white meat were more common than beef, and thick fatty strips of salted bacon and the eating of salted butter have been a central feature of the diet in Ireland since the Middle Ages. The practice of bleeding cattle and mixing the blood with milk and butter was common, and black pudding, made from blood, grain, and seasoning, remains a breakfast staple in Ireland. All of these influences can be seen today in the phenomenon of the breakfast roll. The introduction of the potato in the second half of the 16th century heavily influenced cuisine thereafter. Great poverty encouraged a subsistence approach to food, and by the mid-19th century, the vast majority of the population sufficed with a diet of potatoes and milk. A typical family, consisting of a man, a woman, and 4 children, would eat 18 stone of potatoes per week. Consequently, dishes that are considered as national dishes represent a fundamental simplicity to cooking, such as the Irish stew, bacon and cabbage, boxty, a type of potato pancake, or colcannon, a dish of mashed potatoes and kale or cabbage. Since the last quarter of the 20th century, with the re-emergence of wealth in Ireland, a new Irish cuisine based on traditional ingredients incorporating international influences has emerged. This cuisine is based on fresh vegetables, fish, as well as traditional soda breads and the wide range of handmade cheeses that are now being produced across the country. An example of this new cuisine is Dublin lawyer, lobster cooked in whiskey and cream. The potato remains, however, a fundamental feature of this cuisine, and the Irish remain the highest per capita consumers of potatoes in Europe. Traditional regional foods can be found throughout the country, for example caddle in Dublin or drisheen in Cork, both a type of sausage, or blah, a doughy white bread particular to Waterford. Ireland once dominated the world's market for whiskey, producing 90% of the world's whiskey at the start of the 20th century. However, as a consequence of bootleggers during the Prohibition in the United States and tariffs on Irish whiskey across the British Empire during the Anglo-Irish Trade War of the 1930s, sales of Irish whiskey worldwide fell to a mere 2% by the mid-20th century. In 1953, an Irish government survey found that 50% of whiskey drinkers in the United States had never heard of Irish whiskey. Irish whiskey, as researched in 2009 by the CNBC American broadcaster, remains popular domestically and has grown in international sales steadily over a few decades. Typically, CNBC states Irish whiskey is not as smoky as a Scotch whiskey, but not as sweet as American or Canadian whiskies. Whiskey forms the basis of cream liqueurs, such as Baileys, and the Irish coffee is probably the best-known Irish cocktail. Stout, a kind of porter beer, particularly Guinness, is typically associated with Ireland, although historically it was more closely associated with London. Porter remains very popular, although it has lost sales since the mid-20th century to lager. Cider, particularly Magners, is also a popular drink. Red lemonade, a soft drink, is consumed on its own and as a mixer, particularly with whiskey. Economy. Overview and GDP. The GDP of the Republic of Ireland as of 2018 was $382.754 billion, and in Northern Ireland as of 2016 it was €43 billion. The GDP per capita in the Republic of Ireland was $78,335 as of 2018, and in Northern Ireland was €23,700. Despite the two jurisdictions using two distinct currencies, a growing amount of commercial activity is carried out on an all-Ireland basis. This has been facilitated by the two jurisdictions' former shared membership of the European Union, and there have been calls from members of the business community and policymakers for the creation of an all-Ireland economy to take advantage of economies of scale and boost competitiveness. Regional economics. Economic history. Prior to partition in 1921, Ireland had a long history as an economic colony first, partially, of the Norse, via their cities, and later of England. Though the climate and soil favored certain forms of agriculture, trade barriers frequently hobbled its development. Repeated invasions and plantations disrupted land ownership, and multiple failed uprisings also contributed to repeated phases of deportation and of emigration. Salient events in the economic history of Ireland include 16th and 17th centuries, confiscation and redistribution of land in the plantations of Ireland. 1845 to 1849, the Great Famine occasioned depopulation and mass emigration. 1846, Westminster's repeal of the Corn Laws disrupted Irish agriculture. Major industries: tourism, energy,